In this chapter, we are going to take a look like how a user can access a virtual machine present into the private subnet. Let's break down the flow of how a request will flow when a user is trying to access a virtual machine into the private subnet. So here is our setup where we have already done the VNet subnet creation, and also we have set up the network security groups along with our route tables. And we are having two subnet. One is our public subnet and one is our private subnet. A user cannot directly jump and access to a virtual machine present into private subnet. They need to have a Bastion host, jump host, or a public virtual machine. So here is the request, how it's gonna look like. So a user will first try to access a public virtual machine, and once a user gets access to that public virtual machine, then user is gonna use that machine to access a virtual machine present into private subnet. Because a machine present into the private subnet doesn't have a public IP. This private machine, which is available into private subnet, will only be accessible within this particular VNet. All right, take a pause here, and if you are having a struggle to understand what is VNet, what is subnet, what is IP ranges or a CIDR ranges, what is your public subnet, what is your private subnet, route table, network security group, then I have already covered all of these concepts into the previous chapter where I have started everything from the ground zero. So just try to refer to that particular chapter to clear out the concepts on VNet, subnet, CIDR ranges, public subnet, private subnet, and route table, because that will really be a building block for you to understand these concepts, which I'm just covering into the upcoming chapter. Now we understand the flow, like we need to have a public virtual machine present into the public subnet, and then we will access the private virtual machine present into our private subnet. So let's jump to our Azure portal, and I'll show you like how our public subnet and private subnet looks and what are the IP ranges which I have created over there, and how we can spin up our first virtual machine present into our public subnet. All right, so here is my Azure portal, and here in the search box, you need to type VNet, which is our virtual network. And here there are a couple of VNet which we have created, and the VNet which we have created in the previous chapter is the dev demo VNet Europe North. So this is the VNet virtual network which we have created. So let's take a look onto the subnet which are present within the VNet. So if you take a look onto the diagram, then we have a public subnet and one we have is our private subnet. So here onto this VNet settings, which you will find over here in the left side, in the settings section, you will find the options for a subnet. So click on subnets over here, and here you can see if I expand this column, then you will find two subnet, which is our public subnet and one is our private subnet. And in this subnet, I have assigned the IP ranges. So the public subnet, which you can see over here, which is this one, is having a 10.0.1.0, and the private subnet is 10.0.2.0. So all the IPs are going to assign from these IP ranges. So all the public virtual machine are going to get the IP from a 10.0.1.0, and the private one are going to get 10.0.2.0 IP addresses. Let's spin up a virtual machine into our public subnet. So here in the search box, you can type virtual machine and click on this virtual machines over here. And here you can see there are few virtual machines which I have provisioned in the past, but we are going to create a fresh virtual machine into our public subnet. So here, if you take a look onto this diagram, then I'm just going to create this public VM into our public subnet. So go back to our Azure portal, and here in the virtual machine dashboard, click on create Azure virtual machine over here. And here we need to select the subscription, because everything is related to subscription. Then we need to choose the resource group, which I have already explained in the previous chapter. But if you take a look onto the diagram over here, then this big boundary or the outside box is our Azure cloud. Inside that we have a resource group, and that resource group is just a logical grouping of our resources. So here we have created a resource group, which is our demo VNet Azure. So this is the resource group which we have created for this whole demos. And after that, here we need to enter the virtual machine name. So here I'm just gonna put demo public VM over here. And the reason which I'm working right now is Europe North one. So I'm just gonna stick with that one. Availability option. So I'm just gonna stick with default one. I'm not gonna change anything. Zone, I'm just gonna keep zone 1. Security type, trusted launch virtual machine. Keep everything like a default if you don't want to change anything, because we are just trying to understand the concept, like how we can access a virtual machine present into private subnet. Security part we are going to cover later. Next, we need to choose the image type. So here I'm just going to choose Ubuntu. It's up to you what kind of an image you want to use. Even you can use a virtual machine for Windows as well. But here I'm just going to stick with Ubuntu. I'm also going to cover how you can spin up your virtual machine of Windows. That we are going to cover into the separate chapter. Okay, so here I'm just gonna stick with the size. So I'm just gonna stick with this one because I'm just don't wanna consume a lot of resources which will incur a lot of bill to me. So I'm just gonna stick with a very minimal like a CPU, memory and storage configuration over here. I'm not gonna enable the hibernation. I'm just gonna stick with the default one. And here, once you create a virtual machine, then you need to set up your username as well. So here the default username is Azure user, but here you can change the username as well. But for this demo, I'm just going to stick with this one, and SSH keys. So the key thing over here is, like, whenever you're trying to spin up a virtual machine, then you need to access that virtual machine. And to access the virtual machine, there are two ways. One is like the username and password, and another one is SSH keys. So SSH keys is more secured way of accessing your virtual machine. So here we are going to generate the new key pair for our virtual machine that will give us a public key and the private key. Okay, so here I'm just gonna select the option generate new key pair, and here I'm just gonna use the key pair name as a demo VM public key. So this is the name which I'm just gonna give to it. After that, we are just gonna see few more options like inbound port, and here I'm just gonna allow 22 port because 22 is the default port for accessing or logging into your virtual machine. So I'm just gonna enable this particular port onto that particular virtual machine, and that is also called as network security group. Click next over here. After that, encryption, I'm not going to enable it right now. I'm just going to stick with default settings over here, which is 30 gigs of storage. Click on networking. And now this is a crucial part over here. So if you take a look onto the diagram over here, then here we need to set up this virtual machine into public subnet. So this is the thing we need to choose over here right now. So in the networking section, you need to choose the subnet. So here in the drop down, you will find private and public. So we are going to choose the public subnet over here. Public IP. So we would like to have a public IP for my virtual machine. So here you will see an option none and a demo public VM IP. So here I would like to have a public IP to this particular virtual machine. Okay. The next thing is the inbound port. So again, I'm allowing in port 22 so that I can access the virtual machine. After that, click on next management, and there are a few more default settings. So I'm just going to stick with the default setting over here. We don't need to change anything. Click on next management over here. Rest of the things I will not change anything. I'll just keep everything default over here. Click on next monitoring. So still monitoring, just ignore all of these settings, just keep the default whatever which is selected. Click on advanced over here. So here there are a few more advanced options like a custom data or cloud init, so which we are going to take a look later. But as of now, just skip all of these options right now. We don't need it at this point of a time. Click next, click review and create. And after that, the validation has passed. Just click on create over here, and once you click on create, then it will give you an option to download the the private key for your virtual machine as well, because we set the option to create or generate the virtual private key for our virtual machine. So here I'm just going to click on create. And here you can see generate a new key pair. So it is allowing me to download my private key, which we are going to keep on my local machine. So I'm just going to click on download. And here you can see demo VM public key has been, private key has been downloaded. I should have given a better name to it. Instead of public, I should have kept it as a key pair. But I can rename that particular key. So right now the key has been downloaded. This is our private key. Just ignore the naming over here, and deployment is in progress. So once this is up and running, then I'll try to access that virtual machine using the public IP. Here you can see my deployment is green and my virtual machine has been provisioned. So how we can take a look onto our virtual machine? So here in the search box, again type virtual machine, click on this virtual machine option, and here you can see all of the virtual machines which are running. So right now we have created this particular virtual machine which is into running state right now. So click on this demo public virtual machine, and here we are going to first verify the details which are available once we spin up a fresh virtual machine. So here you can see the resource group, which is a demo VNet Azure. Apart from that, there is a public IP, which is the most important thing for our virtual machine. So this is the public IP of our virtual machine, which we are going to use to access our virtual machine. And apart from that, there should be a private IP address, which I'm just going to show you once I'm going to log in into my public virtual machine. So here are some of the details which are available, which you can take a look once you provision your virtual machine. So now the next question is like how to connect to that particular public virtual machine present into your public subnet. So here I'm just going to take a look onto the diagram once again. So let me go into slide mode. So here this is the task which we are going to achieve. So this is the user, and this user is going to use the public IP to access this particular public virtual machine present into public subnet. So for that, click on connect over here, click on connect. And here there are a couple of options you will find, that is native SSH. So that is a more recommended way of using or connecting to your virtual machine. There are certain other ways like a CLI, and there is a Azure Bastion service also which you can use to connect to your virtual machine, which we are going to take a look later. But let's stick with the basic thing first. So here this is a native SSH. Go and click on select, and here it will give you a command, so which you can find from here. So this is the SSH command which you need to use to connect to your virtual machine. So copy this command over here because we need to modify a few things into this particular command. Now, after you copied this particular command, go back to your terminal over here, and here first you need to take a look onto your key which you have downloaded when we are trying to create our public virtual machine. So let's take a look. So here you can see demo VM public key, and I already told you the naming is a bit wrong. I should have kept it like a demo VM SSH keys. So let me rename this particular key so that it makes more sense. So I will put like a demo VM SSH key, and then I will just put the extension like a PAM. Let's verify it. So yeah, it has renamed right now. The next thing which we need to do before we use this particular key is we need to check the permission. So I'll clear the screen and let's verify the permission. So for this particular key, which you can see over here, it has a read and write permission. So the key rule over here is that whenever you're using the SSH keys, then the private key should only be a read only. It cannot have a read and write permission to access to any virtual machine. So right now we need to change the permission to make it a read only, and then we will be able to access our public virtual machine using the private key which we have downloaded. So for that, I'm just going to clear the screen, and here I'm just going to use the command chmod 400, and then I'm just going to type in the key name and again verify the permission, and now it's a read only key. Okay, I'll go back to the native SSH command section where I need to recopy that particular command because I don't have that copied command in my clipboard. So here I'm just going to paste that particular command, but here there are a few things which you need to change. The key thing is that it gives you a default name which is ID_RSA, and that ID_RSA is not our key name. So we need to change this key name, and we need to put our key name, which is it is not this one. I need to use the key name as demo, this is the correct name. So here we need to change that particular command and use the correct key name. So which is ssh-i and then followed by our key name, followed with our user of our virtual machine, followed with our public IP address. Okay, after that, you need to hit enter, type yes to connect it. And here you can see now we can access our public virtual machine. And this task is over and we can access our public virtual machine. But there are a few more things which you need to verify. The IP ranges of our public subnet, which is 10.0.1.0/24, which means our public virtual machine should get an IP somewhere 10.0.1.2, 3, 4, 5, something like that. So let's verify that private IP. So here in this section you will see that the IP which we have got for our public virtual machine is 10.0.1.5. So that's the IP range of our public subnet, so which is correct. Now the next thing is we need to create our private virtual machine into our private subnet. A short pause over here. If you're liking this Azure series, then I have recently launched my Udemy course, which includes 60+ chapter, and I always keep on adding new chapter to that particular Udemy course, which you can see over here. And this course will take you from a beginner to the advanced level. So if you really want to excel your cloud journey in Azure, then please considering checking out this particular course, and I'll post the link of this particular course into the description section. Now let's get back to that. And for that, again, go back to your Azure portal. In the search box, you need to again go to virtual machine section, click on it, and here you just need to click on create. And the only thing which is going to change over here is the networking section, where we are going to choose the private subnet instead of public, and as well as we are not going to assign a public IP to that particular virtual machine. We are just going to rely on the private IP which is assigned for that particular virtual machine. So here let's choose the resource group. So here I'm just going to choose demo VNet virtual machine. So I'm going to use demo private VM over here, the name. Rest of the things I'm just going to keep it default the way which we have created our public virtual machine. Okay, image, I'm just going to choose this one over here, and here the size I'm just going to keep it default. Authentication type, I'm just going to rely on the SSH keys, and here the key pair name, so I'm just going to choose demo private virtual machine SSH key pair. This is the key which I'm just going to use to access our private virtual machine. Okay, the inbound port is 22. Click on next disks. Everything is default over here. Click on networking over here. So here I'm just going to choose the private subnet over here, and the VNet is this one which we have already created, and all of our subnet public and private one are present into this particular VNet. Okay, NIC, I'm just going to keep it default, and the public IP here we need to select none over here. Okay, after that everything is just keep everything default over here. Click on management, don't change anything. Click on monitoring, don't change anything over here. Click on advanced, click on next tags, review and create, and once the validation is green, then we can create our virtual machine. Click on create, and then also download your SSH key pair over here. So download the private key over here. Here you can see demo private VM SSH key pair, which is downloaded onto my local machine. And once this virtual machine is deployed, so I'll be back once our machine is up and running. Now my virtual machine is deployed. So again, get back to our virtual machine section, which is over here, and click on this demo private virtual machine over here, and verify the few details. So here you can see our public IP address is blank over here. So that means we cannot access from my local laptop directly to this particular virtual machine. So we need to use a jump host or a Bastion host, which is our public virtual machine. So we need to rely on this public virtual machine to access this particular private machine, because both of these machines are present into the same network. But here me, which is sitting outside, don't have access to this private virtual machine or a private subnet. So that's why I need to rely on this public virtual machine. Okay, now let's get back to our terminal over here. So this is our public virtual machine, which you can see, which I have shown to you, which I am able to access it. So I'm just going to clear it. The next thing which we need to do over here is to copy the private key which we have just downloaded. So I'm just going to open a new tab over here, and I'm just going to go to download and Azure section over here. And here you can see this is our private key for our private virtual machine, which we have downloaded onto my local machine. So I need to copy this key to this particular public virtual machine of my Azure, which is into our public subnet. So which I'm doing, if I show you the diagram. So here I'm just going to copying my private key of the private SSH key of my private virtual machine into my public virtual machine. All right, so here I'll just first create the file. So I'm just going to copy the same file name, which is this one, which is, I'll just copy from here, paste it over here, and then hit enter. Just verify. Yeah, the file has been created. Let's open this file, and here I need to copy the content. So here I'm just gonna put cat on demo, demo private, and here you can see this is the content. So I'm just going to copy this particular private key content over from here, go to that particular tab which is into our public virtual machine, paste over here, and then save and quit. Let's verify the file permission because we need to make it a read only. So right now this is read and write, which you can see over here. So let's make it read only. So I'm just gonna make it 400, and now it should be read only. Yeah, which you can see it is a read only now. Now we are going to use this key from our public virtual machine, which you can see over here. So we have already copied this this private key onto this public virtual machine, and now we are going to use that key to access our private virtual machine. Let's get back to our portal, and here just click on connect to copy the SSH command, and here choose the option native SSH, click on select over here, and copy this particular command from here, which is having our private IP, which you can see 10.0.2.5. And if you see the IP range of our private subnet, which is also 10.0.2.0. So it should get a IP like a 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 4 or 5. So we got the IP address, which is 2.5. Okay, now let's get back to terminal over here. I'll clear the screen. I'll paste the command to SSH into my private virtual machine into private subnet, and here I need to specify the correct private key. So here I'm just gonna remove this part, and here I'm just gonna choose the demo private VM SSH key pair, and then hit enter over here, type yes. And here you can see we are able to access our private virtual machine from our public virtual machine present into our public subnet. And also you can see the IP address of that particular virtual machine, which is our private virtual machine, is 10.0.2.5. So this is how we access our private virtual machine present into our VNet, and that's how we use our public virtual machine as a Bastion host, which we also call it as a jump host, and then we try to access our private virtual machine. So this is the concept which is really important, and this concept is used quite widely in the industry, which we also called it as a jump host, Bastion host, these are the intermittent terms which is used for this particular concept. In the next chapter, we are going to take a look onto the service which is available from Microsoft Azure, which is like connect via Bastion, so that you don't need to rely on the public virtual machine. Instead, you can use this particular service of Bastion from Azure itself, and then you can connect to your private virtual machine. And if you have any question, then please put down into the comment section.